Rob Caruth, Amy Grantham,
Here.
Nancy Hopper,
Present.
Katie Jess,
Here.
John Prouty,
Here.
Melissa Smits.
Present. Could you all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Look at that comma up there. There's no comma.
We'll get it by the
I
end
do
of
it
the year.
just because it's a poke in. Uh-oh.
You have before you the previous minutes. What is the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Chris Brown. Aye. Amy Grantham,
Aye.
Nancy Hopper,
Aye.
Katie Jess,
Aye.
John Prouty,
Aye.
Melissa Smits.
Aye. We have an added table file, which we can add to the agenda and approve together. What is the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
Second. Just keep seconding.
We have a motion and again 2 seconds. Roll call, please.
Chris Brown. Aye. Amy Grantham,
Aye.
Nancy Hopper,
Aye.
Katie Jess,
Aye.
John Prouty,
Aye.
Melissa Smits.
Aye. Next, we have the opportunity for the audience. Would anyone like to come before the board and speak? Okay. Moving right along into reports, we have with us Marbella, our Fort Morgan High School student representative.
Hello. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you for having me once again. From the last meeting, I had the pleasure of speaking on the most stressful yet super exciting week that went down at the high school, which was homecoming week. I'm sure by now you all know that the seniors did in fact win this year's Spirit Stick, and the football team definitely won Friday night as well. Our homecoming court was Morelli Del Campo and Renella Keeley, which were well-deserved kings and queens for this year. We just had our fall break, and I didn't have school today, but I did have college classes. So personally, I would say the fall break was not long enough. However, this coming week, we still have some fall games to be played. I know the Mustangs will work hard for those wins. A few of those games consist of the boys' soccer team, whom we are so glad to be having a home game this week against Northridge on Tuesday, Skyline on Wednesday, and Severance, our senior night, on Thursday, after having to drive 3 short buses to all our away games. Volleyball also has a game tomorrow, as well as football on, I don't know which day, but this week. Thursday, as well as cross-country meets and gymnastics. I don't have much information on that, just soccer because I manage for them, and my dad's one of the coaches, so he keeps me on track. We have parent-teacher conferences the 25th and the 27th, as well as the FFA Oyster Fry, which is this Saturday. And then the last week of October, the high school will have haunted hallways on the 29th, I believe. So if you have any kiddos, make sure to bring them along.
Thank you, Marbella. Next is reports from the board. Does anyone have anything? Okay. I talked to Rob Sanders about the superintendent evaluation today, and I have some exciting ideas that I'm going to do, so I'll let you guys know more about that in email form. But it's a scary thing when I'm taking the class for something, because I'm going to use it. So next, Mr. Sanders, Superintendent Report.
I'll be quick here. I've got in front of you. I was asked to bring some information about the Learning 2025. Sorry about how it printed off, but this is how it came off the website. But what we would get if we were to join that Learning 25, and I really like what they have to say. It's all about teaching for the future rather than for the past, and what we would get for that is we would get what's called a community of practice, and we'd be a part of a group that we would, there's over 120 districts already, systems that are already linked into it nationwide, and so we would be working with communities across the country, across the state, kind of in a professional learning community with like districts, and sharing ideas and sharing good practices. The other thing we get is some mentoring and some consulting from the organization. We also would participate in an AASA cohort. That's just the American Association of School Administrators. We have role-alike collaboratives, so there will be principal, superintendent, sessions that people can get into and talk and have conversations, have study groups and site visits. You would have access to a dashboard that talks about information that you're learning there that could go out to the community, lots of networking opportunities, of course recognition and publicity that goes along with it. Working with an organization called Battelle for Kids out of Ohio, and I've worked with them in the past through the Student-Centered Accountability Program, a high-quality organization that's all about education. We'd have some discounts to some different things, that whether we'd go or not is a whole other thing. And then there's just additional optional services. So this is what's on their website. I know it's not probably inclusive of everything, but it gives you a good idea of what we're looking at trying to accomplish with this. And so it really becomes like a professional learning community for administration, which will then help with things that we're trying to implement or do in our district. So, any questions on that?
I saw the breakdown between member and non-member price. I'm assuming you're a member.
I'm a member, yes. Yep.
Got it?
Yeah, that's it.
Moving right along, and I think I need to go slower, I'm going to lose that. On to Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Assistant, Dr. Assessment, Dr. Fresca.
Something like that. Later on in the meeting, I know you're going to be discussing the UIP, so I'll entertain any questions at that time. But for my report tonight, I have been on the road quite a bit with different groups of folks. We went to the National WIDA Conference in Louisville, Kentucky. That was just a couple of us, but I took a group of 10 instructional coaches to the Teaching Leading Coaching Conference, which this fall was held in San Antonio. It was the 17th annual, which I found very fascinating. In all my years as an instructional coach, I did not know there was a national kind of group so it's called the Instructional Coaching Group. It's led by Jim Knight. It was a phenomenal, fantastic conference. And more importantly, I think we took a lot of ideas back on some we're going to be talking with administrators and instructional coaches about clarity of roles kind of across our buildings and what that looks like, and just the importance of coaching and how much research there is actually out on the impacts of instructional coaches. So super excited. We only had 2 coaches not attend, and they both attended virtually. And so we'll all be able to have the same kind of conversation around instructional coaching. The other piece is in June, the state's been rolling all of this additional ESSERS money, and there was a late opportunity to apply for an extended learning. It's called ELO, Extended Learning Opportunity. I know I had talked earlier on last year, like probably starting in the fall, about chatting with the Boys and Girls Club of Weld County. I went ahead and applied for some monies, and 3 months after we applied, I just found out just recently that we were awarded $360,000 to implement a Boys and Girls Club for it's through 2025. So just because of the timing, I had not reached back out to the Boys and Girls Club of Weld County until just last week, and so I had a conversation with their CEO. I need to follow up with him now. I sent him kind of a copy. You had to have a research-based program, which is why the reason Boys and Girls Club, I wrote it in there, because they want to know more than you're just doing after-school programming. And so I know, just a quick reminder, the 5 pillars of Boys and Girls Club are academics, sports and recreation, the arts, health and wellness, and service and leadership. They really are focused on that pillars throughout their programming. And so now, I guess the next phase begins of figuring out, I wrote it in specifically for after school, but they also provide summer programming, and so we do need to use those funds up in like the next 3 years. And then the hope is obviously for sustainability is continuing continuing some efforts with the Boys and Girls Club. So really excited about that opportunity. I think there's a lot of unmet academic needs, but also social emotional needs. And when I looked at the Boys and Girls Club in Longmont, if you remember, we went and visited their after school program, just meeting the needs of those kids and making sure that they can get a hot meal, all of those things after school, Monday through Friday, and then throughout the summer for a very little cost to families. So
is this an application process for students, or are we selecting?
great question. Longmont has, they definitely have some criteria on how they go about getting kids into the program. And I think the biggest thing is, and when we get a little bit further into this process, is making sure that we have kids that don't just want to come one day a week. That's in Longmont what they said. They held really firm on the kids that were actually going to attend every day, especially when you have it at a neighborhood school. What they noticed in Longmont is kids would bus to the other school and then parents would pick them up right away without even going into the club. And so making sure that families are engaged in that whole club process. So I will keep the board I'll keep you up to date, I guess, on further discussions, but I know there are people in the community, and there have been pretty excited about being involved. Community agencies like the Family Center, United Way, I've already talked to them about early on. They actually came on the site visit with us to Longmont, so pretty exciting. And really, before we talk about UIPs in the discussion, so just really a quick overview about the process. So like every year, I'll say not like every year because of COVID and all of this transitional work that the state has been doing. Everything is just not as what we would like it to be. So in a lovely year, we wouldn't actually probably wait for school performance frameworks even to do our unified improvement plans. We want to be utilizing more localized data, which some of the schools are doing a really great job of, and we still probably have some work to do. But you will not see the districts tonight. The district's UIP will not be one of the UIPs you see, because we are requesting to reconsider with the state for both the district level, because we're 0.3 points away from being up into the next category. So it's worthwhile we're going to be pulling some NWA data. We have to get that narrative to the state by the 25th. And then Columbine Elementary is also requesting to reconsider. They're just on the brink of being up into the next category. And so the district has until January 17th to submit the district UIP. But in the whole scheme of things, what we typically do is we do our state assessments. The state redid all of their growth and achievement this year because of the transition and recalculated, which is why they postponed the initial preliminary frameworks, I guess, for schools and for the district. So we've got some work to do, absolutely, but in the UIP system, it's a little wonky the way the system goes through step by step, and I think the state has actually recognized that. So when principals or district administrators are going through, you have to click, but then you can copy from last year, and then you can't see all the steps sometimes. And so we were actually planning on piloting a new kind of UIP system with 2 schools, Baker and Columbine, and the programmer hasn't completed what they needed to for CDE, and so we were kind of back to putting it into this not old, but the system that's a little imperfect, I guess you would say. And so if you did read through the UIPs, there are some really clunky things, like some things that say like this was back in 21, that you have to change the dates and look at your major improvement strategies. But all in all, the one thing we did ask last year principals to do is make sure that they actually had some sort of goal around family school community partnership. And also elementaries, the whole goal is also decreasing the number of kids that are identified with a significant reading deficiency. Questions about the process? Oh, and the state, by the way, also gives you feedback if you are in priority improvement. you will get feedback from the state on your Unified Improvement Plan, and they are required, principals are required to make changes. So I'll just use Columbine and Lincoln as an example because they've been on watch, that they get feedback from the state and they actually have to go and make those changes to their Unified Improvement Plan. Hence, if you saw Vicky's at like 39 pages, she's done a truckload of work and all their diagnostic reviews on making sure that she's included all of the data. Questions?
When is it that they have to have those done by?
The schools?
Right.
Well, it was October 15th, and then they changed it to the 25th.
Okay.
But the system actually opens up quite early in the spring, and we've talked about this kind of prior COVID, and then since COVID, it just hasn't come to fruition. The idea would be that you actually would be like a more living document. And the state has used to not let you get into that until later on, and they've actually made the accessibility earlier. So you actually get accessibility in June if someone wanted to start actually building out their goals, which would be again, in an ideal situation, that's kind of where we would be headed. Hopefully after these transition, I don't know if this is only going to be the only transition year or.
So one of the things that they've really held back on this year, and the reason it's later than normal, is because they were trying to figure out what to do with the parent opt-out. The state at one point had said that school districts and schools cannot be held responsible for parents opting their children out of the testing. That went on for probably 8 to 9 years. Recently, they've decided the state board has changed a little bit, and the state board said, no, we are going to now hold you responsible. Well, it's a really weird thing. So this year, if you have less than 90% parent participation, you cannot even request for reconsider.
Correct.
You just have to live with what you have, and then next year they're going to actually give you poorer scores. And so basically what happens is all these kids take this test in the spring. They put it all together through some massive, crazy algorithm that they have, and then it comes back as a score for elementary, middle school, and high school. The high school has some additional things added in, such as graduation rates and matriculation and some different things that are different portions of that rating, but those ratings come as a result. Mostly, about 35% of it is from growth on student tests, and then 25% is from just the actual test numbers, and then they portion it out with different things in order to come up with your score on your rating, and then based on that you have to write these unified improvement plans, which makes you sit down with your staff and identify priority challenges, what causes it, and what strategies are we going to work together to improve these.
So are they going to get our CMAS scores to us by June?
We've been fighting that for how long?
A
I just
long
thought I'd throw
time.
it out
Yes.
because it would make a lot of sense.
It would, but
It doesn't work that way.
It
Yeah.
doesn't. But I will say that the request to reconsider process is not, it's not the easiest thing.
No.
I mean, they give you a template, they spell out everything, you have to prove you actually have to have 95% participation in order to request to reconsider,
Is it
which we
95?
meet.
That was 90.
And they tell you right on your district performance framework,
Yeah.
yes, you meet that. That's great news for us, because otherwise we wouldn't even be able to request. But the data Pulling and putting it into the categories is a little cumbersome. I know how long it took Simone at Columbine to put hers together. And we actually have the state looking at hers right now. The lady from CDE agreed to take a look at her spreadsheet to see if there was any glaring things that maybe we need to relook at. And I was trying to wait for that feedback before I really start digging into the district, but we're running out of time. But we will be putting that paperwork in by the 25th and see what they say.
Well, kudos to the administration, because those UIP plans are a burden to put together, and on late data for the new year and so forth, so kudos.
We're very impressed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Sanders.
Well, thank you. I did miss one thing in my, that I didn't write down here, and I just wanted you to know that we are in the presence of greatness, I suppose. I wanted you to know that Dr. Frasco was just recently awarded the Colorado School Counselors Association Advocate of the Year up in Keystone, and she was nominated by our counselors, I believe, and actually won the award. So
It was trickery.
congratulations.
And
They told me that one of the counselors was getting the award.
she did not know she was one.
I did not, so thank you. I actually am very humbled. It was a huge surprise, number one, but if you've been on the board a while, or even if you're new to the board, I love working with my group of school counselors, and they are a great group of people, so I was very humbled that they would nominate me for such an award that I didn't know I was getting until right before the awards dinner.
Congratulations and well deserved.
It's neat. So, that's it. Yep.
Finally, Ms. Miller, the Chief Financial Officer.
I just have a couple items. First of all, I wanted to report on the audit. Last week, we had auditors in-house for 4 days, finishing up their final field work. It was a long, busy 4 days, but they accomplished a great deal. They now are back in their home offices, but they're still doing some testing and shooting me questions. And we're also in the process, the other thing that has to be completed before we can finalize the audit is we have to upload our data to CDE, what's with the data pipeline. They basically comb through all your accounts, make sure they're happy with the coding, make sure that the things they're supposed to zero out. And so they'll just shoot you back a report, and when it finally comes back with 0 errors, then we can finish the audit up. So that's where we're at with that. We are feeling really good about it. I'm making a list for next year on some things to rearrange, so we aren't quite so tight on time, but it's coming along nicely. The other thing, we put out an RFP for banking services to all the local banks. We had 3 responses. FMS Bank was unable to bid because they're going through a data conversion, and they just didn't want to take us on when they're in the middle of that. Bank of the West, I got an email from somebody in their Denver office with a 2-page checklist that really didn't tell me very much. We do this, we do that. There was no pricing. It was just kind of like, yeah, just throw it out there. And then we got this proposal from Bank of Colorado. Wow. There are 2 copies if you want to look at it. I just wanted to highlight the things in this proposal that were really unique and good for our department. Let's see, they have a remote deposit capability where you scan your checks, and then it creates a digital copy, and then you can just put that in a file. It would save Gina probably 30 to 45 minutes a day not standing at the copier, making copies, writing up a deposit, and driving to the bank. So it not only would it be more secure, it's a real time saver for her. They also have ACH for payroll, which we currently have with Wells Fargo, but I just wanted to make sure we could do that still. The interest we would be earning on our accounts would offset all of our fees, so we basically would have a 0-fee service, which I thought was really nice. They also have credit cards with rewards, which was something that Rob and I have talked about. We really wanted to get on a program where we would get something back for using our credit cards. And even if I think it's probably in the form of gift cards, we can give those out to teachers, different staff, just as a reward. The other thing that was outstanding is they're willing to come on site and do training with any part of the program that would be coming up. We're looking at probably about a 3-month time period to make the switch, which we don't want to start until after the audit is complete. But I would like the board to consider allowing us to move forward with Bank of Colorado as our new bank. And if anybody wants to read this, we have 2 copies. And Cameron is in the audience if you want to ask him any questions.
Now it makes sense why he's here.
There you go.
Thank you. Moving on to Human Resources Director, Dr. Childers.
Yes, thank you. It is the time of year where we do our health savings account and health reimbursement account disbursements. So we do those monthly in October, and then we figure out who hasn't turned in their paperwork, and we remind them, and then we do them again in November, and then we figure out who hasn't turned in their paperwork, and we remind them. And then we do them again in December. And once we switch over into January, we do kind of wrap things up because of the tax year change. So health savings accounts are tax vehicles, and so once we make that contribution, we're done for the 2022 year. So employees know about that. We've been communicating, and we made our first disbursement in October, and we'll keep going. So that's it from HR.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have discussion items. We have policies on the third reading. Is there any discussion about that? Okay, item B, the 2022-2023 Unified Improvement Plans for the CDE. Anybody discussing that, or we just?
I would entertain any questions if you had a chance to look. I know Pioneers was at a little late. Mrs. Adolph definitely wanted some time with her staff during the professional development day on Friday, which I think you can see a portion of where they actually prioritize the things they're going to work on. But, and again, those are living documents, so we can go in and, you know, upgrade them and add some more goals, add some more implementation steps if we need to. Questions about any specific ones?
What do you feel was the major issue, I guess, that we need to work on as a district that came out of this, that was just glaring to you?
Mr. Sanders?
Well, it's typical. I mean, your math and English language learners, as well as your reading. The other thing that I'm really noticing, and I saw it in one of them, is behavior interventionist skills and trying to get more training in the classroom to identify and to de-escalate situations rather than referring for special services, for example. So that's really what I noticed when I went through them, kind of the theme, if you will, around math, reading, and
right. And I would say overall, generally, for years, it's really our academic achievement more than it is our growth across the system, across the buildings. If you specifically only looked at growth, it's not that we're not growing kids, but when you actually add in that whole achievement across the levels, especially from CMAS, we're not, I mean, as a district, we're not meeting, but we're at least approaching in academic growth and post-secondary and workforce readiness. And I think back to the whole, we do have good participation, which, as Mr. Sanders alluded to, that is becoming a big thing. And so we are lucky that we don't have a ton of people opting out to as much testing as we do from the state level. I think that our principals lean in, again, more not based off of CMAS. They're leaning a lot more into, if you look at a lot of their stuff on NWEA and looking at setting those school goals based off of not a one-year summative, assessment. We're looking more 3 times a year benchmark. How are we growing kids there? Paying attention to formative assessments in the classroom. And in regards to math, of course, that we are implementing a brand new curriculum, a program K-12. And so we've been jumping through a little, just the implementation dips that we knew were going to happen, but we actually have elementary math instructional coach and a secondary math instructional coach. So coming to the table and having those dialogues, I think, is probably the most important of anything that comes out of your data.
And it was probably there before and I just missed it, but I found it interesting to look at all the Bibble scores for Sherman. I thought that was, I know they've done it probably before, but I don't recall seeing it in the UIP. It may have been, I just don't remember. But it was interesting seeing all that data there.
And thanks for bringing up Sherman, because actually Sherman is one of those unique, we know it's unique as an early childhood center. They actually don't get a school performance framework. We've actually in the past calculated it. We kind of took a pause because we're trying to figure out what data is even really, most essential. But the state doesn't actually release their unified improvement plan. I actually had to have the state do that for me a few weeks ago. So it doesn't automatically populate a template for them.
And that's because RK is separate from the other elements.
Right, yep.
well, and I think
Right.
I think it's important to note that, with the state testing, with the way that it comes back so late, a lot of times we get a lot more bang for our buck on the MAPS testing. And so when we go through and look at the district MAPS testing, the NWEA, we'll probably see, I won't say considerable more growth, but we'll see enough growth that I believe that it's worth a shot to look at getting that request for reconsideration to see it shouldn't be based on just one day and one test, and we should be looking at a body of evidence, and that's what we're trying to get across here, is this body of evidence, so.
Well, and I think that body of evidence too, we're looking at, you know, the impact from COVID, which was pretty significant, especially to math and reading. And I reached out to some people that I know that are teachers and talked to them about that a little bit, and they were telling me that it's difficult with the reading when you have students that are not at grade level and are still being passed on because parents don't opt to keep their child back. So, I mean, I'm sure that that's probably being addressed at some level, but I don't know, you know, how do you really address that when parents, you keep passing them on and they keep falling further and further behind. So that becomes, it just kind of snowballs, I think, and becomes a bigger issue.
But I think that's been a problem for all schools, and you know, we can talk about the factors of how we can turn around and get a better rating from the state, but I mean, we're Fort Morgan and looking at those plans, like, we can do this, no matter what
Absolutely.
exceptions we have, no matter what, we can do this. And those UIPs show that they're ready to do it, and I'm excited to see it happen, so.
Right.
And we also have the MTSS, so if we know those kids are struggling and behind, we need to really make sure we're putting those kids in the MTSS process and targeting for the interventions.
Okay, is that it for that discussion item? Discussion item C, the new banking services. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Mr. Armagast, who's here? And thank you for being here.
I don't have any questions, but I can offer a personal and professional testimony that the Bank of Colorado, their specific branch is just, they go above and beyond. We have all of our accounts over there now, thank goodness, and they've taken excellent care of us. They're also open for a half day on Saturdays, which can be useful if you have a really busy week. But they definitely understand the community. They are very involved in the community. They do a lot of giving back. They sponsor a lot of stuff. And so if it was all up to me, I'd vote yes.
Well, and one thing I failed to mention, one of the reasons that we went down this road is we wanted a local presence. And with our current bank, sometimes it takes me 30 minutes to just get somebody on the phone, and you know, there's not a local presence that you could even go talk to them. So this, to me, is a really exciting change.
We bailed a long time ago from that bank in our business. So.
Tony, what would the transition process look like if we did go back?
Well, what we kind of talked about is once we're ready to just jump in, we'll start moving accounts a little bit at a time. And run them concurrently, just to make sure everything that's currently in Wells Fargo gets moved over. We won't close anything out until we're fully sure everything has been moved over to Bank of Colorado.
Time frame?
At least 3 months.
Okay.
It is a process.
Any other discussion about that? All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. I have before you the personnel action report and a list of checks for September. What is the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Chris Brown?
Aye.
Amy Grantham?
Aye.
Nancy Hopper?
Aye.
Katie Jess?
Aye.
John Proudy?
Aye.
Melissa Smits?
Aye. Moving on to action items. Action item A is policies, third reading. We have BEC, GBAB, GBEA, GBJ, IC/ICA, the board resolution addressing temporary remote learning for 22-23 school year, IHCDA, JFAB, JFABA, JFABE-R, JFBA, JFBB, LBD-R. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move to approve that whole list.
No, you gotta say them.
Second.
Well, you'll have to wait a minute.
We have a motion and a
Gotta read it
second.
again.
Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Chris Brown?
Aye.
Amy Grantham?
Aye.
Nancy Hopper?
Aye.
Katie Jess?
Aye.
John Proudy?
Aye.
Melissa Smits?
Aye. Action item B, we have 22-23 UIPs for CDE for those schools that are listed. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Roll
Again,
call.
thanks.
Yes. Roll call, please.
Chris Brown?
Aye.
Rob Caruth? Oh. Amy Grantham?
Aye.
Nancy Hopper?
Aye.
Katie Jess? John Proudy?
Aye.
Melissa Smits?
Aye. Action item C is to approve the Bank of Colorado for banking services for Morgan County School District RE3. What is the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Chris Brown?
Aye.
Amy Grantham?
Aye.
Nancy Hopper?
Aye.
Katie Jess?
Aye.
John Proudy?
Aye.
Melissa Smits?
Aye. Next, we have newsletters, and I think I need to read them all because the time is not right here right now. Darn it. But you have before you newsletters for Sherman, Columbine, Baker, and Pioneer. Advanced planning, Board of Education meetings in November. I'm just not going to be able to do this. Or November 7th and November 21st, and we do have a work session planned for before the November 7th meeting. Thanksgiving break is November 23rd through 25th. If there's no, yeah.
I was going to ask, the work session on November 7th is, what time did we decide? Sorry.
5:30, I believe.
5:30.
5:30? Okay, thank you.
Is there any other business to come before the board? All right, we're adjourned at 7:36.
Oh, I was close.
What was the bet?
That one.
I was 37.
Is there a pool?